Everywhere you have these great big cliffs, these vertical cliffs that come down to the water. There are about 200 sites of pictographs between northern Minnesota and Hudson's Bay. And the ones at Hegman Lake are absolutely beautiful. The colors are clear. They're 3 big visual images. And over the years, there have been all kinds of people who wrote about pictographs. They always talked about them as mysterious, something from the past, but we don't know what they are. How do you climb inside the brain of someone who lived 300 years ago? And I must have gone to that site about a dozen times over the years, from high school on all the way till a few years ago. I made sketches and I took photographs of the site, and I kept working over these images over and over again, trying to piece them together. But I didn't realize then that I had to think like a scientist and not an artist. And that was a big leap for me.
Yeah.
And when I did that, that's when things started to go together. Who are the people that met there and said, well, this is what we have to remember and this is what we have to teach. And this is the way we're going to remember it, by putting these images on the rocks. The winter maker, great panther, and a great moose figure. So that we see the images on the rocks, we see the constellation, and then there's the prophecy, the prediction, the story that goes with it. Traditions that extend all throughout Ojibwe lore that go with it. So rather than just looking at the pictographs themselves as art. And you know, I was tempted to do that because I'm an artist, looking at the pictographs, and I said, well, this is the work of my ancestors. It's like being reunited with an old friend. All this knowledge is there. You're going to say the moose isn't important to Ojibwe culture? It's central to Ojibwe culture.
Oh,
the winter maker, we live 6 months of winter here in this part of the world. It's very, very important. So there's all kinds of stories about either the great moose or the winter maker, and the great panther, the spirit of the water, and the spirit of spring, the dangerous part of spring, the floods. There's a lot there that's still to be interpreted.
Talking a little bit more about the moose in the night sky, it's a fall constellation.
Right, the great moose pictograph identified the constellation of Pegasus. The figure is kind of squarish. Well, moose are kind of square. And that's a great square of Pegasus. So Pegasus rises late summer, just as the moose are starting to get a little aggressive. And then as the fall goes on, the moose constellation gets higher and higher in the sky. And so this is when the moose present themselves to the hunter. And not only do they present themselves to hunters, but they present themselves to cars and locomotives and other things. They're very aggressive. They don't back away. Then what happens is that the constellation starts to set. And that's when the moose get weaker. As the winter goes on and as spring comes, the moose just suffer from the cold and the scarcity of food. They get weaker and weaker until it finally sets in the west. And so the rising and setting of the constellation matches the rising and setting of the moose out there in the forest.
Fall or autumn is a time for hunting, and you've talked about a cultural story associated with moose. Could you share that again?
Well, it was based on a pictograph of a moose smoking a pipe. In all the hunting societies, all the Indian hunting societies, there's usually a story just like this about how humans got permission to harvest animals. There's no question that Indians revere the animals they hunted, but they still hunted them, they still killed them, and they ate them. And so what happened that made this possible ethically? You know, the Plains Indians have this about the bison, and the Ojibwe have this about the moose, that there was a mutual obligation between moose and humans. and looking back to legendary time when, or I should say mythical time, to when animals could speak and humans could speak to them. And there's a moment when animals gave permission to humans. They would give of themselves to humans, provided humans did certain things. And one of the things was ceremonies of respect and honor.
Sure.
If the Indians stopped doing that, the animals would withhold their gifts. Another would be their social obligations, to share the food once you got it, to take care of your family, to honor elders. So that pictograph of the moose smoking a pipe was the use of tobacco as part of these ceremonies. In the story, the pipe makes its appearance in a moose lodge. The moose in this story live in a lodge just like people do, and they have different places that they sit in and sit around the fire and they converse. And this pipe magically floats through the doorway and goes around the moose population. And that's what set in motion the use of tobacco as a sacrament to honor the moose. And the moose then agree that they would give of themselves.